Hello, and welcome to Behind the Curtain with Daniel Meyer. This program is part of Lakeside Online, the series that brings us together to hear what's planned for this coming summer at Lakeside. Lakeside Online is meant to keep you connected, explore the Chautauqua experience, and get an introduction to what's planned for this summer. Before we get started with tonight's program, Charles Allen has joined us, our CEO, and he'd like to say a few words.
Good evening, everyone. It's so good to see so many Lakesiders on tonight. It is. I have Daniel Myers have made me a fan of the symphony for sure, um, and I just want to, it's such a great addition to Lakeside, and he has so eloquently served Lakeside the last 6 years, and so we want to say thank you to him. I want to give my special thanks for the time he takes, the education that he brings, the professionalism and excellence that he brings to every show. And I don't know how he's going to top last year's production, but I'm rooting that he does, and so I'm looking forward to so many more. But I also want to pause a moment and say thank you to Candace for hosting us and doing such a wonderful job in our education program and running our online series. And as many of you know, Shirley has done something that I wish she hadn't, and that was book her last season, this season that's coming in. And so I'm trying to find as many ways as possible to keep her working with us and so forth. And so we'll be making an announcement soon. We have found someone and that will be taking that mantle on from Shirley and trying to fill some big shoes. But I just want us all to just give a round of applause to Shirley for all the great years that she has brought to Lakeside and all the wonderful changes that she's made in our programming. And she's definitely set the bar really high. And so, Shirley, thank you so much for your service and even hanging on with us even through the transition. So, thank you so much.
You're most welcome, and thank you for the kind words, Charles, and for everyone's applause. Thank you.
Yes. The and as we are this is the generation and we are all on this call tonight because we are the generation that is laying the foundation for the next 150 years of Lakeside. And so this year is just as important as the previous year and how we move forward. And so I'm excited to not only have the opportunity and the pleasure of serving Lakeside as a president and CEO, but I'm excited to serve alongside of this team that we have, all the things that's planned for the year, and I'm sure you will go into this season and leave this season while with so many wonderful surprises and the things that you've able to see that we have planned so far. Thank you for always being a part of Lakeside, and we'll look forward to seeing you around town here in a few months.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Charles. Back to Behind the Curtain. We're really pleased that Daniel Meyer is here to take us behind the curtain. Daniel is the music director of the Erie Philharmonic, artistic director of the Westmoreland Symphony in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, and director of orchestral activities at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh. And as Charles mentioned, this will be Daniel's 6th year as the music director and conductor of the Lakeside Symphony. And as you already know, we've got Shirley Starry joining us tonight, and she's been working hard on this exceptional summer entertainment. And we're also pleased that we've got 2 artists from the summer's program who've agreed to join us. Maybe we have more artists who've popped on, so we'll get a chance to chat. We'll let Daniel and Shirley introduce them when it's time. And tonight's agenda is just what we've advertised. It'll be an overview of the summer programming and a chance to hear from Daniel on his vision for the 61st season of the Lakeside Symphony. If you have any questions tonight, just please drop them in the chat. We'll get to them the end of tonight's program. And Daniel, we're all here. We're excited to hear about the plans. Are you ready to share the highlights of the season?
I'm ready to go. First of
Okay.
all, thank you so much, and good evening, everybody. It's great to see you. Thank you, Charles, and thank you, Shirley, for those nice introductions. I should admit to you that I am one in a very long line of people that are very sad to hear that Shirley is going to be stepping down from her position. You should know that in addition to programming the entire summer season, she also serves as the orchestra manager, which is to say, making sure that we get all the musicians that we want back for the orchestra and hiring any musicians where we might need additional ones in the ranks of the orchestra. She, of course, takes care of all of the details involved with organizing the ordering of music and making sure that the guest artists are hired and they get safely to town, and a myriad. It's incalculable what she has essentially done for the orchestra. And that's just above and beyond what she has already done in the course of planning the entire season. So you need to know that there are indeed huge shoes that she's leaving to fill. And we're going to miss her very, very much, but also very grateful to have had this opportunity to share this time with her. And I've learned a lot from Shirley, and I've really enjoyed spending my time over the summers with her. And let's just start first with talking about, this is actually a project that I hatched together with Shirley, and that was this idea of bringing a resident string quartet to Lakeside for the summer music residency. And part of the idea for me was twofold. One was, we're always hiring string players from hither and yon to fill up the ranks of the orchestra, because we never always have a complete roster, and we always have openings that need to be filled. And so I thought, well, we can certainly entertain the idea of bringing in a group that's already established, and they would, of course, then fill in some of those rank spots within the orchestra. But then they could also function as a resident string quartet. And I was thrilled when I found out that the members of the Bayo Quartet were A, available, and B, willing to take on this new project. And so last summer was the first time that we brought a resident string quartet to Lakeside. And you saw them, of course, on the stage during concerts. You saw them, of course, play a piece on their own on one of the big symphonic concerts there, on that little shelf that we have, that little stage shelf that we have right in front of the stage. And then you saw them all over campus. I mean, you saw them throughout the property, playing near the lake, playing, at the town square, just about anywhere. A crowd would gather around the Bayo Quartet and listen to them play. And of course, they were rehearsing or doing something informal, but it just really attracted a crowd, and it put a smile on my face every time I walked by and saw this incredible music making and people just stopping by to listen and enjoy it. And that was kind of exactly what I had hoped would happen with that idea, is that the resident string quartet would, of course, enhance and even make the sound of the orchestra more wonderful than it already is, but then also to serve as a group that could get into smaller spaces and play outside of our regular rehearsals and concerts. And so what I thought we might do now is introduce Jason and Sean Newcomb. They are brothers, and they're both members of the Bayo String Quartet. And I'll leave this to both of you. Maybe you could just give us a little origin story. Can you tell us a little bit about how the quartet formed, and how you wound up making your residence in Pittsburgh?
Certainly. My name's Jason. This is Sean. We're brothers. We don't just share the last name, same last name. So we've been playing together since we were quite young. We had a family string quartet. Our father taught strings in our little hometown, and our mom played cello with us. So we grew up playing chamber music. In fact, it was just, I think we both sort of thought everybody just, that's what everybody did. So it was sort of a surprise to learn that that's not necessarily true. So I came to Pittsburgh for school, and I went to Carnegie Mellon University. And when I was finished with school, I just found that I really loved Pittsburgh. So I decided to camp out. And at the time, Sean was living in New Zealand and was wanting to relocate back to the States, and said, "Hey, how does Pittsburgh sound?" Which I said, Excellent, great. I was actually playing in a different string quartet at the time, but I was making my way out of that, and we were looking to form something else. So we spoke with a couple of other friends who were in Pittsburgh, and hey, let's give this thing a go. Which, by the way, is a little bit atypical. Most string quartets that you see on the professional stage are formed during school. They might be doing competitions. They might have had a coach throughout their schooling. So ours is a little bit odd. I had already been playing in orchestras for several years. Sean had been playing in Nashville Symphony, and we knew we wanted just something different. So the way we formed is a little bit atypical.
Tell us a little bit about the other two members. Who are they, and how did you guys connect with those two musicians?
Certainly. Our cellist, Ryan Ash, he has been a member since nearly the beginning. When we first formed the quartet, we formed with a friend of ours that we knew would be temporary while we were searching for someone who would be a permanent member. And this person, Ryan, had been showing up to concerts of mine for years, so I recognized him. And I think you had just suggested, what about that cellist who keeps showing up to all of our concerts? So we invited him over to read some music with us, and it clicked. It was really great. So we really got to know him in the quartet purely. And then we were looking for another violinist in 2020, the pandemic, which, as you can imagine, quite a few chamber music ensembles folded during that time. We had lost a lot of concerts. A lot of groups had lost a lot of concerts. And one group that had unfortunately folded, there was a friend of mine playing in this group, and it's a small community. So we all keep track of each other. We know what's going on with each group. And when they folded, I thought, I know one of the violinists could be a good match. I've seen him play a lot. We met once briefly at a conference, and so I called him up and said, "Hey, you want to move to Pittsburgh, or come and play with us, audition with us?" And he came, and his name is Gio, or Andrew. We call him Gio, Andrew Giordano, and he came and played a few concerts with us, and we really thought it was a great fit. So he moved from Colorado to play with us full time.
And so tell us a little bit about your lives now as a professional string quartet. Do you guys rehearse every day of the week? Do you have concerts every weekend? Do you travel? Is most of your music making in Pittsburgh? Tell us a little bit about your overall existence as a chamber group.
Yeah, we try to we try to not ever have more than 2 or 3 days apart in terms of rehearsing, just to keep our chops consistent with one another. Our average is we do about 20 hours of rehearsal a week, even when we have concerts. Part of our concertizing, we decided early on that we're not interested in being a new music quartet that specializes in only contemporary, but we also don't want to be just a classics quartet. So we do a lot of contemporary, we play the classics, and we do a lot of crossover. And so that takes just a lot of upkeep on all of those levels. But for a lot of our touring, it ends up being done with through our manager, a lot of the classical concerts. So for that, we'll be on the road maybe 7 to 10 days a month doing concerts. A lot of those are presented concerts or will be in classical works. But we also do other concerts that are a little bit more experimental. We might go to Virginia Tech or a self-produced concert where we amplify and do that kind of stuff. And then we're here right now, we're actually in my studio where we do a lot of recording. We have our own record label. And so we do a lot of recording, and we have the business side where we not only record, but publish our own stuff. So there's always plenty to do. We never have enough time, and we all love it like that because we all have our own lives too on top of all that.
Tell us a little bit about your experience at Lakeside. What were you expecting when you first came, and what was the reality?
I think that we've been around enough to know that no matter what we expect, it's probably not going to be exactly that. So I think I came in just well, let's see what happens. I think you and I drove in earlier than we needed to be there, just so we could explore the community, take a look at the venues, see what it was like. And we just had a blast when we were there. It was interesting that a lot of the stuff we ended up doing there were outdoor engagements.
Yeah.
And some of those were casual. It might be a rehearsal. We had a dress rehearsal, I think, out on one of the docks, which attracted some people, and that was really great. And we put on a concert in the square. And the reason I mention that is outdoor concerts are a different animal from indoor concerts. It does affect the type of music that we might play. It affects our instruments quite a bit. We have to consider things like the wind and the sun and all of nature, all of these nature things. But we just found it was really beautiful and lovely to play there. Had such a blast. And there are actually still a couple of venues I'm curious to try. We haven't got a chance to play in yet. So.
Well, from my perspective, you guys have brought just a wonderful breath of joy in music making and experimentation, and I love that you guys are game for just about anything. And it's been a joy to get to work with you and hear you play as a group, because I really respect and admire what you guys do on a regular basis in terms of just your programming and the interesting combinations of music that you choose throughout the year. And then, of course, it's also a wonderful and a gratifying thing to have you in the ranks of the orchestra, because you bring, your unique musical personalities, and you bring your talent, and you bring your virtuosity, and that, of course, adds to what we're experiencing on the stage with the musicians as well. And I think it's been a very happy circumstance too to know that the orchestra very quickly adopted you and accepted you, and we're very, very happy to have you within the ranks of the orchestra. That's just kind of a instant family member. So thank you for all of that. Can you tell us maybe a little bit, just give a couple ideas of what's on the coming plan for you, maybe the next couple weeks? Maybe talk about a project you're working on, or a tour concert you have coming.
Yeah, we're right in the middle of heavy tour season. In the last 2 weeks, we did about 7 or 8 days of touring in California. Then we were in Florida, and then we just actually performed in Pittsburgh 3 nights ago, which was great to perform on our hometown. And right now we'll start learning next season's rep over the next couple weeks, but continue our touring. We'll be in Maryland next week to do a handful of concerts and some outreach. And then come April, we need to tie up some buttons on some recording projects, as well as continue getting some of the new rep season, so that when we go into festival season this summer, including Lakeside, we have a little seasoning on some of the new music.
That's wonderful. Are there any questions for the Bayo Quartet?
While we're waiting on any question, I just want to say the quartet, along with our symphony musicians, are some of the hardest working musicians. And the cottage that the quartet is staying in, we had to make sure they had an extra room, almost like a second living room, so they could set it up as their rehearsal studio. These gentlemen work very hard, and it's very evident in the quality that they. Thank you, Daniel, for introducing us to them, and thank you, Jason and Sean, for all the hard work you do.
Our pleasure. We were happy to have that room. Sean packed an entire vehicle full of equipment, because we were at the time learning things with heavy electronics and foot pedals, and we needed speakers, and honestly half of that equipment I don't even know what it is, but he and Ryan are good at doing that, and so we were really happy to have the extra space.
So I think we have a question. When will you be at Lakeside? The answer to that is pretty much the full residency. So the orchestra is going to be giving their first concerts very end of July. I think our first official performance is the Pops concert with Lisa Roman. Is that right, Shirley?
Yes, Saturday, July 27th.
Right.
And then the quartet will join us for the remaining 2 weeks. So they'll be 4 of the concerts with us.
So they'll be, of course, performing with the Lakeside Symphony Orchestra. They'll be performing a standalone piece in one of our main stage programs at Hoover Auditorium. And they, of course, will be playing a kind of a recital program on their own at a location to be determined, and then they'll be popping up all over the place as they were last summer, weather permitting, and people will get a chance to just stroll by and hear them play. So Jason, Sean, absolute pleasure to have you guys with us, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. And wish you every success for the rest of the spring. And I'm very much looking forward to your residency in Lakeside.
Thank you very much. We're looking forward to it as well.
Thanks for
All right.
joining. Good night.
Thank you. So let's dive into the season. As Shirley said, we're bringing Lisa Vroman for the very first concert of the Lakeside Symphony season. Lisa Vroman is a seasoned Broadway actress and singer. She starred as Christine in Andrew Lloyd Webber's The Phantom of the Opera for many years on Broadway. Part of the first program is essentially all the songs that she's ever wanted to sing, but maybe never got to sing because, you know, she wouldn't have been assigned that specific role, or it's things that she has sung on Broadway stages, namely some of the music from Phantom of the Opera by Lloyd Webber. She has some really great stories to tell about him and about her experiences on stage. And if you're doing Phantom 7 times a week, there are bound to be things that don't go according to plan. So I think it's pretty fun to hear her talk about those things. So she'll pepper her singing and her performances with reactions and thoughts on her Broadway career. So I think we're gonna have a lot of fun. I've had the great pleasure and fortune of working with Lisa in a number of different situations, and she's always hit it out of the park. So we're really excited that she's joining us as our very first performance on July 27th. There she is. Then we move on to our very first symphonic concert, and that's the 31st of July. That's a Wednesday night. And the program includes a work by an Icelandic composer. Her name is Maria Huld Sigfusdóttir, and she is a brilliant up-and-coming composer who wrote a piece called Oceans. And it's influenced, of course, by the environment and her thoughts on the oceans and what an important resource that is to us on this planet, but a beautiful, evocative piece that I think will make a really stunning concert opener for the 31st of July. Then I'm happy to welcome Adam Golka, the virtuoso pianist who makes his home base in New York City. He is going to be playing music of Beethoven's Piano Concerto No. 3 in C minor. Adam is not only a brilliant pianist, but a good friend, and he actually helped me and the Erie Philharmonic choose our brand new concert Steinway. So he came over to the Steinway factory with us for an entire afternoon, and I thought he would be bringing stacks of scores, and he didn't. He just came with a coat on and sat down at the piano and was able to play multiple concertos from memory on each piano so that we got a full representation, a full picture of what each piano sounded like. It was like having our own private recital just with him playing 7 different Steinways in one afternoon. It was a brilliant and really fun way to choose a new piano. And the good news is that we all agreed that there was one specific instrument that was head and shoulders above the rest, and that was the one that we chose as the concert instrument to live in Erie, Pennsylvania, and be our main concert instrument. So that was just a little fun side story about Adam. And he has great opinions about music and says really intelligent things about music, in addition to being a fantastic performer. And then we'll round out that program with Robert Schumann's Symphony No. 1 in B flat major. It's nicknamed the Spring Symphony. And if you know the music of Schumann, you know that this symphony is filled with the invention and the life that is hallmark of Schumann's language. It is, well, it's filled with all the optimism of spring. And it's such a beautiful way to celebrate the opening of the season with the full orchestra playing symphonic music. So we're thrilled. That's going to make music of Sigfusdóttir, Beethoven, and Schumann all in our first night, the 31st of July. Now let's move on to the 2nd of August. It's the Friday of that same week. And this is our opportunity to feature the Bayo String Quartet. So they'll be the center piece on the program. They'll play about 20 minutes worth of music. And then the very beginning of the concert is the very famous Les Préludes, or the famous tone poem by Franz Liszt. Franz Liszt, French composer, is known as being kind of the father of the symphonic poem. I'm not sure that he actually invented it, but he certainly kind of made it, codified it as a legitimate means of symphonic expression, especially in the Romantic era when composers aren't necessarily interested or primarily thinking in terms of writing symphonies, although some of them still were. But Liszt was kind of forging his own path and wrote this really wonderful um, virtuosic piece that shows off the orchestra really well. So we'll play Les Préludes, then we'll bring on the Bayo String Quartet to play a piece or two that they have selected, and then we will finish the concert with the beautiful violin concerto by Johannes Brahms. And Ty Murray is going to be joining us for the first time with the Lakeside Symphony, and a wonderful violinist who's in residence at Yale University. She teaches at Yale and concertizes all over the world, and she chose the Brahms as her debut piece for the Lakeside Symphony. And that piece is so large and so all-encompassing that I thought it would be a perfect way to end the program. It kind of functions as our symphony, or lives in the symphony slot on that particular program. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun with these artists, not only Ty, but the Bayo String Quartet, all together on the same program, 2nd of August on Friday. Now let's move on to our next symphonic concert. And we're looking at Tuesday, the 6th of August. And we're going to be opening the concert with George Walker's beautiful Lyric for Strings. If you know George Walker, he's was a very talented concert pianist and also a very highly regarded composer. This Lyric for Strings was was inspired by Samuel Barber's Adagio for Strings. So it's very much a brother of that Adagio for Strings, beautiful piece that originally lived as a string quartet and then was expanded for the full string section of the orchestra. It's slowly evolving and evocative and just all the beautiful things that you would expect from something that is inspired by Samuel Barber's famous Adagio. Then we're very happy to bring back Isabel Durenberger. You may remember, it was probably already 3 or 4 years ago when Isabel performed with the Lakeside Symphony. And in fact, she was the artist that was selected to make her debut when I debuted with the Lakeside Symphony. So I'm really excited to bring her back to the orchestra. Of course, she's grown as an artist and as a musician and as a human being, and we're really happy to bring her back. She's agreed to play music of Mozart. She's going to be playing his Violin Concerto No. 3 in G major. And then on the second half of the concert, there's a reason why there's an organist standing there. His name is Jonathan Meyer. He is the organ faculty at the Oberlin Conservatory, brilliant musician. I had a chance to work with him just last year. And he's going to be playing the grand organ part in Camille Saint-Saëns' Organ Symphony, his Symphony No. 3, which is, if you know this piece, it is a showstopper. It is a favorite of many audience members because it figures prominently in the second movement, well, actually the first movement, but the second part, and then of course the finale of this grand romantic symphony. And Jonathan is going to draw just about every sound he can out of that instrument that we have on stage there in Hoover Auditorium. So a really nice mix of an all-string piece, a smaller chamber orchestra kind of piece with Isabel playing the Mozart, and then a grand romantic symphony with full brass, full percussion, 2 players sitting together at the piano, and then of course 1 player sitting at the organ, adding this immense sound to what you'll be able to hear that night in Saint-Saëns' Organ Symphony. So that's the 6th of August, Tuesday night. Then on the 9th of August, this is Friday night, this is our typical collaboration with a ballet company. Ohio Contemporary Ballet maybe is perhaps a name you're not familiar with, but you're certainly familiar with the dancers because their former name was Verb Ballet. And we've been working with Verb Ballet in the past couple seasons. They have changed their name to Ohio Contemporary Ballet, but it's the same group. Maggie and Richard are still running the professional company, and they have professional dancers on their roster that will be joining us for that performance. And we're going to be performing a brand new choreography of Edward Elgar's Serenade for Strings. And after that, we're going to be performing some music of Antonin Dvorak, his selection from his Slavonic dances. And then we're going to be finishing the evening with music of Georges Bizet. It's music from his famous Carmen suites. So both suites, suites number 1 and suites number 2, which are extracted from the larger opera. And then the operatic voices are taken over by solo instruments, of course, but they will be dancing to those entire suites. So both suites number 1 and number 2 of Bizet will be danced by Ohio Contemporary Ballet with the Lakeside Symphony Orchestra in the pit area. So we'll be down on the main floor, and then the dancers will be up on the stage, just as we have done in days past. So I'm, again, very excited about this combination of music. What thrills me is that Maggie and Richard are so willing to work with us and find pieces that work for the orchestra, that we're able to put together in a short amount of time, but also make really effective music for choreography and for dancers. And the Elgar will be probably a premiere. They may have workshopped it a few nights before this performance, but you will be seeing pretty much a brand new choreography of the Elgar Serenade for Strings. And then they are creating their own version of the Bizet Carmen music to go along precisely with these wonderful suites that we've selected. So I hope you agree that this is an exciting season, and one that features music that you already know and love, but also music that I think that you may not be familiar with yet, but will really enjoy, and some artists that are new to us, like Ty Murray, and then some artists that are old friends, like the Ohio Contemporary Ballet and Isabel Durenberger, even though she's not all that old. She's, to my understanding, I think she's still in residence at the New England Conservatory of Music in Boston, so she's been studying there. And I can't wait to work with her again and just hear how she's grown as a musician and as an artist. I should also mention that we have developed some programming for families, and we've taken the families of the Lakeside Symphony and broken them into their individual parts. So if you notice, on July 24th, we'll have a woodwind ensemble playing a family concert in the park. On the 29th, we'll have a percussion trio concert. That's another family concert, and that is designed so that kids can sit up close to the performers and actually get involved. Of course, the Bayo String Quartet will be playing their own standalone recital concert on August 4th. On the 7th, the LSO Brass Quintet will be playing a family concert in the park, and they've done that already for us for a number of summers, and that's kind of a well-oiled machine, so we're excited about that. And then you'll also get a chance to hear LSO musicians play in individual beautiful homes across the Lakeside property in the Candlelight Showcase, which is our signature fundraising evening for the orchestra, where donors get to come and visit all these beautiful homes, beautifully decorated, and then get to hear private chamber music performances by the Bayo String Quartet and by musicians from the ranks of the Lakeside Symphony. So nice opportunities. These are certainly things that you'll want to put in your calendar, particularly if you have grandchildren or children or family members that would like to learn more about the symphony or learn more about the orchestra and hear these groups kind of as in their own families. So all the woodwinds together, all the percussion together, the brass, and then the strings and the percussion.
Wow, that was wonderful, Daniel. You really cruised right through there. I used to say Roger Berkovitz would take us to the Toledo Museum of Art and do his roller skate tour of the galleries. I think that was our roller skate tour of the symphony season. So that's quite wonderful. There have been some questions popping up, and one comment. Ann Schnapp, one of our symphony musicians, is on with us today, and she has done a lot on logging the history and the rep that the orchestra has played over the years. She was quoted in the recent 150th anniversary book on the symphony, or on Lakeside, that highlighted the symphony. And she mentioned that the Mozart Concerto and the Schumann No. 1 have never been performed by the symphony. So these are two new works for our audiences and our symphony. So thank you, Anne, for sharing that. Candace, I'll leave it to you. You may have been watching the questions a little better to see if there are other questions that have popped in there. I know. Go ahead.
No, why don't you go ahead? It sounds like you have a question, and while you do that, I'll go through what we've got here in the chat.
Daniel, you mentioned the piece as a tone poem, and I'm not familiar with that terminology or symphonic poem. Can you explain that a little, please?
Sure. So in the Romantic era, we're talking late 1800s all the way up through actually present day. There are composers still writing tone poems. Well, actually, a lot of them are. And the idea of the tone poem is to not write in a prescribed symphonic form. So you introduce a theme, you bring a counter theme, you maybe migrate into a different key area, and then you come back and you recombine the themes, and you have a development, and then it's a very formal structure, and a lot of composers use that formal structure pretty much from Haydn and Mozart all the way up through the end of the 19th century if they're writing in what we musicians call sonata allegro form. And you find this sonata allegro form permeates the music history throughout pretty much that whole era of pieces we know and love, and symphonies and concertos that we know and love. So we get to the Romantic era, and composers are now thinking, well, I don't need to use that very rigid format in which to express myself. I can choose other ways to do it. So some composers are starting to take literary ideas, like what maybe it's a play or a novel or a specific character. They might be using Greek mythology or Roman gods. They might be using philosophy. Richard Strauss even used works of Nietzsche to write music inspired by. So composers are now finding different ways to construct music that may be representational of something other than the music itself. So it's music about something else, really, is what tone poems and symphonic poems are. And they can be short. They could be 7 or 8 minutes, or they could be long, 20, 25, 30 minutes. I mean, Gustav Mahler, when he wrote the first movement to his Second Symphony, thought that perhaps that would just exist as a tone poem, and he would never expand it into a symphony. And later, and so he called it funeral rites, which is kind of an imposing name, but it's actually a really wonderful and dramatic piece of music that then he later decided would serve as the first movement to a much larger symphonic structure. But in most cases, if composers set out to write a tone poem, they're looking to write music about something else. And usually the title is referential to that other source of inspiration.
Thank you.
Well, I do have a couple questions from Alan Kent. He wanted to know more about the organ. I there's a word here that I'm not familiar with, Hopwork. I don't know if that's a brand name or it has, so maybe you can speak to that. And he also asked a question earlier, and I don't know if it was about the format of the Zoom or about the concerts. He wanted to know if you'd ever consider a side by side. So, I mean, it's okay with me if Alan wants to jump on and ask ask those questions in person, since I'm having a hard time really knowing what he means by the side by side.
Well, if we're thinking about a side by side, generally that means that community members who play musical instruments, who played them in the past, can sit side by side with the professionals and actually play through a piece.
Oh, I
A lot
see.
of major symphony orchestras organize these over the course of a year. And it's actually done in most cases through application process or even competitive application. So let's say you're a practicing lawyer or practicing school teacher, but you also happen to be a pretty accomplished violist. Well, you can send a little clip of your playing, or maybe play an audition piece. And a panel made up of musicians in the symphony will say, yes, this person is good enough and will really benefit from the opportunity to sit side by side with a professional musician. So there's such thing as an adult side by side, where people who are already well into their careers or maybe even retired but still actively play their instrument would like to participate in something like that. And we also have what are called student side by sides, and those are designed for young musicians who are playing in their school ensembles but would love to have the opportunity to sit side by side with a professional musician and play a piece in the standard repertoire. And so,
The particular case I'm thinking of was side by side in a rehearsal.
there you go. Okay. So in a lot of cases, what would happen is you would choose a concert, where this would happen, and then there are a set of rehearsals where the conductor works with the with the non-professionals and spend some time coaching them and working on them. And they might even break into smaller groups and coach with section principals from the orchestra, from the professional orchestra. And then the week of, or the day of, or the day before the concert, everybody comes together on stage, and a musician of the professional symphony will sit here, and the non-professional or the amateur will sit right next to them, and it goes like that down the line, particularly in the string sections that have multiple people playing the same part. And then in some cases with winds, it's the principal oboe might say, okay, you get to take these 8 measures, you run with it. So when we get to that spot, it's all you. So it's a lot of fun. It takes some keen organization skills and a little planning. But my guess is that if we polled the residents of Lakeside, we might find that we have a pretty strong representation of music makers and people that are still actively practicing or participating in their own community orchestras in their home communities.
Yeah.
I
The other
did
question
just-
was about a Hopwork organ. It's a electronic sampling. I'm probably saying spelled it incorrectly, but it's great cathedrals around the world have been sampled, and now you can apply them to any kind of organ you've got.
My understanding, Shirley, is that we have a purely electronic instrument. We do not have any pipe work installed in Hoover, to my knowledge. So it's a completely electronic instrument that then has to be run through amplification and loudspeakers.
Yes.
Yeah,
But the
Yep.
Hopwork would operate on any kind of organ.
right,
It's a software package.
right.
We
Well,
have had several quotes for that. It's a couple $1,000s, and my vision is to figure out how that fits into an eventual Hoover renovation if that
Aha,
comes down the road. So, thank you.
good, thank you.
Yeah, and Anne, while you were chatting about the side by side, Anne provided some more history about something similar that would happen in the 70s at Lakeside. So, yeah.
Could I elaborate on that a little?
Yeah,
Yes.
please.
We had a music camp that had students separate from the professional orchestra for most of the season, and it was actually a 4-week season then. And we would do one combined concert that the students would learn. About half of the concert would learn the same music the professional orchestra was going to play. So then at that concert of the symphony, the students would join the professional musicians on stage, and it would be called the combined concert.
That also reminds me, some of our plans and thinking about the future also involve choral activity at Lakeside. We would really love to be able to organize maybe a workshop or a choral camp where people can come and be in residence in Lakeside for a week or two and study from a great choral master and really work up towards a big performance that then we could do with the Lakeside Symphony. Like imagine you spend a whole week with one of the top choral conductors in the country, coaching you on Verdi's Requiem, and then you get a chance to actually sing the Verdi Requiem at the end of the week with the orchestra. So something like that is another kind of side-by-side experience that we kind of are dreaming big about what we can do with this great resource and this wonderful orchestra that we have in residence, and offer people a chance to really get involved and experience it firsthand. I remember when I was a student, both in Boston and Vienna, I jumped at any opportunity I could to sing in the chorus, because that meant I had a chance to have a face-to-face with the maestros that were leading those specific performances. So I got to sing under Robert Shaw, I got to sing under Sir Simon Rattle, Seiji Ozawa, some of the biggest names in classical music you can actually have a chance to sing with and interact with if you're singing in the symphony chorus.
Daniel, that prompted me for a question. Who do you consider as kind of your mentor or the person you looked up to as you were studying conducting?
Now, I've always admired the ones that made great music, that thought a lot about music, that had very specific ideas about how it should be shaped, that had a real strong work ethic. I think my first mentor at Denison University, his name was William Osborne, brilliant organist, brilliant musician, very, very fine choral conductor. He was kind of my first mentor when I even started considering following a career as a conductor. And then, of course, along the way, you learn as much as you can from whomever you come into contact with. It's a bit medieval in that way, in that it's a master apprentice situation where you watch the master at work, but you really only get to practice the art of conducting when you get in front of other people. I mean, there's limited to no value waving your arms to a recording or standing in front of a mirror, because you're not experiencing what it feels like to elicit a response from human beings. And there's a delay factor there that you have to accommodate and live with. But there's also a psychology component. What do you do in a group dynamic? What do you do or what do you say to inspire a whole group of people to do something more focused or better than they would have if they were just left to their own devices? So that's the other big element of conducting and music making that you really only get to experience when you stand up in front of that group. And so that's why I kind of call it medieval, because you don't get to do it until you do it. And all the musicians in the orchestra, they get to rehearse in their practice rooms and in their bedrooms, in their kitchens, and wherever they rehearse. They get to wrestle with the instrument and wrestle with the music, and understand what they need to do in order to make it successfully through a performance. But as a conductor, I really just have to rely on my previous experience and kind of troubleshooting before the troubles even happen. So in my score study, I look for places where I think it could potentially need some extra help from me or would need some time in rehearsal to pinpoint specific problem spots. But those mentors have been so valuable. I mean, I was a wonderful musician, David Hoos, who taught me at Boston University. When I was an assistant at the Pittsburgh Symphony, I got to watch all the great conductors come through, and their music director at the time, Maurice Janssens, who has since passed, was a brilliant musician and a brilliant conductor and had a great rehearsal technique. And I learned so much about how to manage the course of a week and how to construct rehearsals leading up to the performance so that you don't wear out your musicians, but you keep them engaged and keep them actively thinking about making an interpretation. And at that point, when you're dealing with the Pittsburgh Symphony, these are musicians that can play anything on the page. They're not struggling to play their instruments. They just, they can deliver. And so the thing that you're looking for there is, what do I have to say to them? What do I have to offer? And that's largely a clear technique and a clean technique to help them do what they need to do as easily as possible with the least amount of fuss, but also have a very clear conception of how the piece should unfold over time. Because they may have collectively played the Brahms Fourth Symphony hundreds of years more than I will have ever conducted it. But what I can offer is a very clear conception of what I think the piece means and how I think it should unfold over time.
Thank you. I think you do it brilliantly. It is so much fun to stand in the wings of the stage and watch you. I remember Bob Cronquist, I used to say something like, well, it looks like you've got that score down. And he said, I don't need to learn anything as long as the baton knows it. But you make it look like that. It is just there and flows off of your fingertips so easily. So bravo.
Well, thank you. But it's another one of those things that, it's a lifetime of learning and a lifetime of experience. And, I can certainly stand on what I experienced with a specific piece, years ago, but I also have to apply what I know about the ensemble and the acoustics at Lakeside to inform the decisions that I'll make about what I think about that piece. And sometimes I'll look at a score that I conducted 10, 12, 15 years ago and think, oh, no, I don't think that way about it at all anymore. I wouldn't make that choice at all. And that's the joy of reliving these pieces, that you can breathe fresh ideas, breathe fresh imagination, and also capitalize on the wealth of information that you've gathered and stored up over those 15 years intervening between conducting that piece back when I was a younger adult and now that I'm a more mature music maker. So, and I think all of us artists feel that way.
I'll ask one more question and then we can wrap it up. I know you have your finger on the pulse of new composers and you're trying to bring some more contemporary compositions in. Is there anyone you're watching, you have your eye on now that you'd like to see worked into our repertoire over the future years?
That's a good question. I just did a piece with the Toledo Symphony by Nikero Okoye. She's an African-American composer living in New York City. And she wrote this wonderful piece called Voices Shouting Out. It was so colorful. It used the orchestra really well. She even had the brass muted, sounding like Miles Davis. Um, I thought, wow, this is someone I'd never heard of before, but I was really excited to work with her music. Um, wow. I mean, if you're looking at I would say probably the dean of American composers right now is John Adams. There are two John Adams, incidentally. There's a John Luther Adams, who's also a wonderful composer, but then the John Adams of Nixon in China and Short Ride in a Fast Machine, I think is probably considered kind of the premier composer in the United States right now. But he's a very seasoned composer. Jesse Montgomery is an up and coming composer who has written some really wonderful things for orchestra, and she takes her knowledge of the stringed instruments, and you can really see that applied in the way that she writes music. Jennifer Higdon is another favorite composer of mine, also a real keen ear for orchestral color and vibrant rhythms. Wow, there's a whole generation of really fine composers that are writing interesting music, and my job is just to kind of pick the best from those examples. Because I really think not only should we be playing the Beethovens and the Brahms and the Tchaikovskys of the world, but we should also be supporting and perform the music of composers of our time, and understanding that these composers have a unique voice, but they also have something really important to say to us as performers and as audience members. Like Maria Sigfridsdottir, the one who is writing this piece called Oceans. I mean, I don't think I've heard any piece quite like hers. It's so atmospheric, yet it has gorgeous harmonies that emerge and evolve, and then they subside, much like the tides rise and fall in the ocean. So there's this incredible imagination for how do you apply music to something that's in nature. These are choices that composers are making every day, and some of them are finding really fascinating ways to do it.
Well, thank you. Candace, I know you have a couple slides to kind of wrap up our program today, and a big thank you out to Daniel Meyer.
Yeah, I do. I do have a couple slides. So let me just say thank you very much. This has been a really great program. I love your description of the music. It just really is it's inviting and just very, makes me really looking forward to the summer. So thank you very much. We don't have any more questions. We did have an idea come in that I think we're going to take back to the department, see if we can't make that work. It's, about a glossary of terms that might be a nice thing to hand out at concerts and especially family concerts. So we'll see about doing that. So thank you very much. Yeah, let me give me 1 second, and I'm going to share my screen again. And it's really to remind people about some upcoming programs, Lakeside Online programs. Yeah, so skipping. Oh, yeah, so I wanted to remind everybody about the Lenten Study program. It's every Wednesday. We've already had 3 programs, and there's 3 more to go. They're released every Wednesday night at 7:30, but they're also available if you see this link up here at the top of the page. You can go catch up to the last 3 or just pick one that you'd like to go to. Yeah, I've really enjoyed those. The other thing I want to remind you about is the total solar eclipse on April 8th. There's lots of programming going on. We've been advertising this a lot on social and other ways. And if anybody has any questions about what we're doing, I'll stay online later on just to answer some of those questions because we've been involved with that pretty heavily, making sure It's everything we need. And then a couple reminders about 2 more pillar programs. The education pillar will be on Sunday, March 24th, and the recreation and wellness pillar will be on Sunday, April 14th. So just, like this, a look into the season and what's being planned, and an opportunity to ask questions and, get to know these 2 directors a little bit better. So that's it for me. Once again, thank you everyone very much. And like I said, you can all exit the meeting. And if anybody wants to stay on and have any questions for me, or Shirley, can you stay on another minute? I'll stay on to answer any questions about the Eclipse programming that we're doing. So good night. Thank you very much.
Great job, Candace. Thank you. And
Sure.
Good
thank you,
night. Thank you
Daniel.
guys
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah.